So I'm going to start with this image of sculptures. This is a project that I did with me and my brother, a collaborative practice with my brother, is known as the Dufala brothers. This is an old body of work that I'm kind of like I don't show and talk about very often, but in preparing for this presentation, I was looking back and I kind of looked at it with new eyes, thinking about how really it does tie into my entry point into trash, and both literally but conceptually. This is a toilet tricycle race that was kind of first off, it economically driven for me as an artist. I think it was my inroad, and of course, when I was like maybe 23 years old when I did this project, and I didn't have a lot of money, so buying 15 toilets to turn into these tricycles and race with a really varied demographic of racers was not necessarily economically feasible. So it was really turning to dumpsters and abandoned homes and the streets to procure a lot of the materials that would make it possible. But when I looked at it and I thought it was maybe an exercise in celebrating something we all have in common, while still being able to distinguish our own individual relationships and differences in that something. And that, and as non-specific as that is, I think that's a driving force for me as an artist, is being able to relate and celebrate similarities, but also being able to be definitive in how they're different across many different perspectives. So was the beginning of my journey into the world of becoming friends with salvage workers, waste handlers, scrappers, really what built a community and a network of people who I still am in touch with and continue to work with for a variety of different reasons, but also how I showed up at the current situation that I'm in, which is Rare. Rare's mission is to challenge the perception of waste culture by providing a unique platform for artists at the intersection of art and industry. And it's situated inside of a construction and demolition waste recycling company in Northeast Philadelphia. We offer artist studios and space and hands-on assistance and access to 500 tons of construction and demolition waste daily. So when I say construction and demolition waste, I'm going to, for the rest of the presentation, call it C&D waste, just so everybody knows. I have a very up close and personal relationship with C&D waste, but I think when it comes to recycling and it comes to trash, C&D waste is often not paid attention to as much by common folks and people in communities because it's really kind of obscured by design. It's a residual part of construction, demolition, manufacturing, big business, big industry. And it's not at all part of the curbside domestic waste and recycling that becomes the center of attention. So I want to try and illustrate what we do from the C&D waste perspective. So this is just a drone shot that kind of shows the Revolution Recovery is the parent company that hosts our tiny little nonprofit Rare. So you can kind of see that where it says Rare, that's where our studio is. And we bring artists into the yard during operating hours and we pool materials. To kind of give you the 101 on construction and demolition waste, this is what it is. It's new homes, it's old homes being torn down. It is clean outs. It's a lot of different manufacturing processes that generate a lot of waste, but they have to get rid of it. So it goes into a C&D waste stream. This is when all of that C&D waste is going to a repository or a transfer station. If it's a recycling center, this is what it would look like. And you can kind of see on the left in the middle of the picture, there's a front end loader. It's orange, and that's pushing material from the tipping floor, which is where all that material gets dumped. All 500 tons start right there. And that's the beginning of the sorting process. And then it gets pushed into a recovery pile and into a landfill pile. And out of the 500 tons of material that come through our facility every day, 80% is diverted from landfill. That's still a lot of material that's being buried in landfill daily. So the beginning of the sort process looks like this, and you can kind of see that piece of equipment up on a little ramp and that incline at a 45 degree. That machine loads all of that material onto that incline, and inside of the building, you can see to the right top, it's literally that 400 plus tons of recoverable materials is sorted by hand. And you can kind of see how there's bays corresponding to each worker, and they're pooling not a terribly it's not a lot of different materials, but at the bottom of the screen you can kind of see this is the bread and butter of a recycling center. You have drywall, you have ferrous, non-ferrous, steel, aluminum, stainless steel, rigid plastics, dimensional lumber, film plastics, cardboard, and rubble. It's not that exciting when it comes to its diversity, but in every demolition job, if you think of any building that's being torn down because they're going to be putting up a new loft or a new housing unit, there is some of all of that material in that demolition job. And the same goes for the new construction. So the materials there's not too many in variety, but I wanted to use dimensional lumber just as a kind of exploding or imploding that material and explaining a little bit more. By volume, dimensional lumber is the largest material that comes through a C&D waste stream. This is an image of one of our artists in front of the dimensional lumber pile in the Delaware facility that we don't have an art program at, but we visit quite often. If you think of any kind of goods or a product that is going anywhere, it's being either freighted and then trucked, and 99.9% of the time, that product or those goods are on a wooden pallet. And if you think about beyond a pallet, there's a crate. You think about all the consumer trading and everything going everywhere, supply streams, distribution, all of that. It has wood as its foundation because that's basically what's carrying the economy back and forth in the marketplace. So just to kind of give you a little bit more of an eye on the complexity of why this is arriving, they all have different reasons for why they're showing up in the volumes that they are. And not all of them are as easily as recovered as others, but wood by far is the largest material and has a complicated history in terms of what can really be done with it. And most of the times it's just used to create ground cover and mulch. It used to be used to manufacture a biofuel, but it's not a sustainable end to what that can be used for. So this is just an image of the pile in the yard, and this is a recovery pile. Like, this is technically, none of this is going to landfill. This is all those materials that show up and are separated and aggregated and then sold on the commodities market for value. And this is also where our organization comes in, and we're able to use it as an educational tool, but also as a material to create art from. Backtracking a little bit, this is the first official piece of work that was ever made at the recycling center. On the left is a dumpster coffin made entirely and very intentionally made totally out of materials that came from the waste stream, including the vessel. The dumpster itself was being decommissioned and probably would have been scrapped. And the inside of it is tailored with R32 insulation and contractor's plastic, and then piped around for the ornamentation of a coffin and its gold detail with PVC piping. And then the mandala is made with gold paint marker. On the right, I should say, this is the first piece that was ever made at Rare. And I like putting art out into the world. This is a really kind of, in a general way, kind of talking about how we value or not value or recognize culturally the impact of waste and what it means, and kind of using this as a metaphor for how we treat these things, and anthropomorphizing with the coffin aesthetic. You can swim into a lot of different conversations with this, but I like the idea of when you put artwork out there like this, some of the ways that you see this kind of spin into new avenues of conversation. To pivot your attention to the right of the screen, you can see there's a dumpster coffin making an appearance in a project that me and my brother were part of called Funeral for a Home. So just to kind of reiterate, I think putting artwork out in the world is a way to invite conversation around a wide variety of topics and beliefs. And in this instance, it really snowballs into this other initiative. And Funeral for a Home kind of served as a direct response to years of widespread demolition in sections of Philadelphia in an effort to generate critical thinking and discussion around issues of housing development and preservation. So it took this really kind of wide lens on waste culture and then narrowed it into a very, very focused project that was a much larger team. It wasn't an individual artist's voice. It became a community's engagement. And I just wanted to use that as an illustration of like how some of the things that I've been working into kind of, start here and then kind of funnel, but still can then go back out again. It's important to me to see that growth and ability to be generative and create new conversations around where it starts. To get back to what we do at the recycling center, we create opportunities for artists, and this is a small portion of the artists who've come through our program, but I just wanted to show some of the variety. You have an architect in the top right corner who's constructing these temporary assemblages to reflect iconic Philly architecture using the material and the tools of the laborers from the recycling center itself. And that you can kind of see there, it's supposed to be the PMA. I know that you need to use your imagination. Things like all the way to the left in the center, there's a little unit that an artist wanted to make this portable station that allowed them to educate people on how to make soap out of waste oil from restaurants. And this was something that they could then develop and put into the back of their car and present in a wide variety of neighborhoods and venues all over the city, but even regionally as well. The one that the Lily Cox Richard, you can kind of see it looks like a bunch of copper. I like this because it's an example of where you're not necessarily just working with the material. At the recycling center, one of the things we have is we have a seat at the table from an industry perspective, which is very, very unique and an incredible privilege for us to be able to talk to the owner of the recycling center to get a meeting with somebody from another business who typically, and I know this from my personal experience, if I call like a scrapper and I'm like, hey, I'm an artist, can I come into your scrapyard? They're like, no, thanks, click. It's really kind of a hard thing to access when you're just coming from outside. But working from within the industry, it gives us the ability to have a referral system where you can immediately have that conversation where otherwise you'd be cold calling and getting rejected on a regular basis. So for Lily's project, she was really trying to understand how to access large amounts of copper to bale them in multiple dimensions, kind of looking at this in a narrative way as the entrails of a post-Rust Belt landscape. And for us, we wanted to help Lily gain access to a whole world of language that she didn't understand because of so much opacity between industry and, common civilian life. So this is just a very small example of some of the projects that we've done. It's not just working with found materials and the trash itself. It's really looking more broadly at the waste industry, the industry partners and community partners, and how we can kind of, with as much resources we have available, see specific projects to fruition. I should say at the core of the mission is to visualize this thing that is invisible to many, many people. So if I had my way, I'd pile like a 4-story tall pile of C&D waste and municipal waste on Broad Street, right? Like that's kind of the things that I think are impactful, that make people think about what they have to confront in a place where you normally don't see it. My job is to run this nonprofit, but at this point, I'm trying to cultivate a better understanding in how we directly engage with climate justice issues. And I think a little bit more of the special projects and talking about Merrill Latterman Euclid and our relationship to a Superfund site that's being remediated just south of our site would have been able to kind of dovetail the land and the trash issues and more environmental and ecological concerns that are at the center of a lot of climate justice issues.